Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a brilliantly absurd hypothetical scenario. What if someone, somehow, just pulled the plug on the ocean floor, right? It's this massive thought experiment that completely reshapes literally everything we know about our global geography, our deep history, and honestly, human survival itself. We're going to drain the oceans, meter by meter, and see exactly what happens to our planet. To truly understand the fallout of a thought experiment like this, we first got to grasp the mind-boggling scale of the deep blue sea. I mean, we spend our days walking around on solid ground, looking at dirt and trees, right? So it's incredibly easy to forget that land is actually the absolute minority on this planet. When you think about it, we're basically just living on a few dry islands scattered across a massive, dominant water world. Just look at that staggering disparity. Roughly 97% of all the water on Earth resides squarely in our oceans. That covers over 70% of the planet's entire surface. It's an almost incomprehensible volume of liquid, holding our fragile global ecosystem together. You know, the freshwater we rely on, like rivers, lakes, and glaciers, that makes up just a tiny fraction of a fraction. The vast majority of Earth's water is salty, deep, and heavily concentrated in these massive oceanic basins. So just how much water are we really talking about here? Well, back in 2010, a group of scientists used advanced satellite measurements to estimate the ocean's total volume, and they landed on a staggering 1.332 billion cubic kilometers. That number proves very quickly that this is, for sure, nothing like simply draining a bathtub. The sheer math of emptying this much liquid is mind-blowing. If you took all that water and put it into a giant floating sphere, it would stretch thousands of miles across. Okay, let's dive into the actual mechanics of this scenario. Imagine a literal plug hole, say exactly the size of a London double-decker bus, suddenly opens up at the bottom of the Mariana Trench's Challenger Deep. That specific spot just happens to be the deepest known point in the entirety of the seven seas. It's a dark, crushing abyss nearly 7 miles straight down. So it's pretty much the perfect place to start our planetary drain. Now, the biggest logistical question you probably have right now is, where does all this rushing water actually go? Because you obviously can't just pump it onto the land. So for the sake of our thought experiment, and really just to keep things moving, let's say this massive volume of water drops directly through a portal into the void of space. Just picture a giant cosmic drain sitting at the bottom of the Pacific, sucking away the lifeblood of the planet. You might think springing a leak of that size means an immediate, apocalyptic disaster, right? Where the water just disappears in a flash. But the timeline is actually massive. If you were expecting a sudden catastrophic roar of water, you'd be incredibly disappointed. On day one, the global water level drops by less than a single centimeter. You wouldn't even notice it at the beach. It takes several hundred years just for those massive cinematic whirlpools to even begin to form at the surface. And to completely drain the oceans, even if we sped things up with dozens of plugs, you're looking at a couple of thousand years of slow, relentless draining. But as time marches on and that 1.332 billion cubic kilometers of water slowly surges through the planetary plug holes, the Earth's map undergoes a radical sequential transformation. Fasten your seatbelts, because we're about to literally redraw the globe, one depth marker at a time, descending into a totally unrecognizable world. Let's start with a 50-meter drop and see how this builds. At just 50 meters down, the world already looks totally unfamiliar. Island nations suddenly become entirely connected to their neighboring landmasses. The UK physically bridges over to mainland Europe. Sri Lanka connects seamlessly to India. Java, New Guinea, and Borneo all lock into massive unified territories. Entire sea borders simply vanish overnight. What's absolutely incredible here is that these newly exposed land bridges are exactly the routes ancient humans used to migrate across the globe during the last ice age, back when sea levels were naturally much lower. Meanwhile, we absolutely have to talk about the Netherlands. This is a country that has spent thousands of years engineering brilliant, desperate ways to hold back the sea. In this scenario, they'd finally be able to exist completely above the water level. All of those historic seawalls, dams, and dikes would suddenly just be overlooking vast stretches of completely dry, low-level Earth. It's kind of ironic, really. They spent centuries fighting the ocean, and now the ocean has simply retreated from the battlefield. Dropping further down to 100 meters, well, the environmental costs start to hit hard. We lose incredibly rich underwater ecosystems, like the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. That area suddenly becomes exposed as a huge, dry new island off the coast of Nova Scotia, completely destroying those historic fishing grounds. But luckily, there's a distinct silver lining here. Inland bodies of water, like the Black Sea, simply become landlocked. Because they lose their connection to the receding oceans, they actually stop shrinking and retain their crucial water supplies, creating these massive, isolated oases. Now, at 200 meters drained, the map shifts dramatically across the Pacific. The thousands of individual islands that currently make up Indonesia suddenly merge together. They combine into one massive, continuous landmass, completely wiping out the archipelagos and totally redefining the geography of the entire Asian coast. You're no longer looking at a smattering of tropical islands. You're looking at a brand new, vast expansion of the Asian continent pushing deep into what used to be the ocean. Plunging down to 500 meters, we hit a crucial point that creates an insane geographical bridge. Japan, an island nation historically defined by its maritime isolation and naval borders, becomes completely connected to Russia via the Korean peninsula. Think about the wild implications of that for a second. You could theoretically walk directly from downtown Tokyo, straight through the Korean peninsula, all the way to Moscow without ever getting your feet wet. It completely shatters thousands of years of geopolitical boundaries. Hitting the 1-kilometer mark, the changes on the globe are just staggering. A previously isolated island nation like New Zealand balloons outward, exposing its vast underwater plateaus to become a huge new continent, taking up a massive portion of the southern hemisphere. And on the flip side, look up to the north. The Arctic Ocean gets completely cut off from the rest of the global drainage. It just becomes a vast, isolated, and rapidly shrinking inland sea trapped right at the top of the world. Plunging a massive 3 kilometers deep, the Earth begins to look truly alien. Those massive underwater mid-ocean ridges finally emerge. Keep in mind, these are actually the longest mountain ranges on the entire planet right now, today. They're just completely hidden from us beneath the waves. But in our drained world, they are suddenly revealed. They emerge as towering, rugged mountain ranges dominating the dry, abyssal plains, carving up the strange new Earth with jagged peaks that stretch for thousands upon thousands of miles. Having a completely dry abyss grants humanity unprecedented, undeterred access to the ocean floor. And this is where things get truly wild for historians and treasure hunters. This means exposing up to 3 million undiscovered shipwrecks currently sitting right there in the open air. It represents untold amounts of lost human history, from ancient galleons to lost submarines, finally coming into the light. And yeah, it also reveals tons of potential buried gold and ancient treasure, completely ripe for the taking. It would absolutely spark humanity's greatest, most frantic global treasure hunt ever. But that brings up a massive looming question. Could we even survive long enough to find it? Well, while draining the oceans absolutely guarantees a catastrophic ecosystem collapse, massive climate shifts, and likely a major extinction event, it's not totally hopeless. Small pockets of resilient human survivors might actually be able to endure and rebuild society. They do this by clustering around those surviving inland water sources we mentioned earlier, literally clinging to the shores of places like the Great Lakes or the newly isolated Black Sea. And if those future resilient survivors finally built up the courage to climb down the rocky cliffs of the completely dry Mariana Trench, they would have to prepare for whatever alien nasties the ocean left behind. Just imagine them encountering ticked-off giant squids wondering where their water went, the bleached bones of massive megalodons, or perhaps something worse, like Cthulhu just waiting at the bottom, very confused and very angry. All jokes aside, this thought experiment leaves us with a truly fascinating reality to walk away with. We don't actually need to pull a cosmic plug to wonder about the incredible, unexplored abyss that exists at the bottom of our oceans today. The vast majority of our own planet remains entirely alien to us right now, heavily hidden beneath millions of cubic kilometers of freezing, dark water. So the next time you look out at the sea, take a moment and ask yourself, what unimaginable secrets are actually lying down there right now, just waiting in the deep, silent dark to be discovered?